Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to use the asterisk method for factoring a quadratic trinomial in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. And this method is particularly useful if you have a leading coefficient, so that you have a number other than 1 where this a is. Now, one thing that's very important if you're going to use this method, you have to check your trinomial first to see, is there a greatest common factor? If there is a greatest common factor, you're going to need to factor that out first. So in this case, you will see that 45, 52, and 24 have the common factor of 3. So I'm going to start out by factoring out that 3. 15x squared. 14x and minus 8. So the first thing I did was factor out the greatest common factor of 3. Now I'm going to kind of ignore that 3 for a while and look at the remaining quadratic trinomial, which is 15x squared minus 14x minus 8. Now your textbook probably tells you to use guess and check to factor this trinomial, and that is a good method, and I like to teach that as well, but sometimes students get frustrated having to keep erase, guess and check, erase, erase, erase. So here's a method where hopefully you won't have to erase. What you need to do is draw an X, and then put one more line in that X, horizontal through the center. And that's what I'm going to call the asterisk. Now, each spot in your asterisk has something unique that you need to put in it, and you need to remember what goes where. In the top, we're going to put A times B. A times C. Well, remember, this is A, this is B, and this is C. So here we're going to put 15 times negative 8. And that will give us negative 120. On the bottom, we are just going to put B. B in this case is negative 14. On the top left and right, we're going to put the same thing. In each of those blanks, we're going to put A. A is 15, so 15 is here and goes here. Now we haven't done too much math so far, we did a little bit of multiplying here, otherwise we've just copied A and B into our asterisk. Now we have 2 blanks left, and here's where the thinking comes in. You need to figure out what goes here and what goes here. Well, the numbers that go here and here are going to be 2 numbers that when I multiply, I get negative 120. But when I add those same 2 numbers, I get negative 14. So I have to find 2 numbers that when I multiply them, I get negative 120. But when I add those same 2 numbers, I get negative 14. Well, to do this, it's helpful to draw a little factor chart here and put negative 120 on top. Now we'll write down all the factors until we find a pair that when we add them, we get negative 14. I like to start with 1 and move on from there. Here I'm just going to write the positive numbers, but I'm going to remember that in the final, when I finally write down the numbers, the factors in my spots, that one of them is going to be negative, because that's how I'm going to get to multiply to negative 120. Well, this is not going to give me negative 14. 2 and 60. No. 3 and 40. No. 4 and 30. No. 5 and 24. No. 6 and 20. I'm going to stop there and notice that if I add 6 and negative 20, I'll get negative 14. So I'm going to add in here 6 and negative 20. I'm almost done. I almost have my answer. All I need to do now to find my two factors would be to look here and here. And notice that these each sort of form a fraction, one number over the other number. Well, these two fractions are going to be my factors. Before I can write my factors though, there's one last thing I need to do, and if I can simplify either of these fractions, I need to do that. Well, here I notice that 3 goes into 15 and 6, so I can divide each by 3 and I will get 5 over 2. Here, 5 goes into both of these, so I can get 3 over negative 4. Now normally when we have a negative in a fraction, our instinct is to move that negative to the top. Don't do this now. When your negative is on the bottom, you want to leave it there in this case. So how is this the factorization of my original quadratic trinomial? Well, it's very easy. I'm going to keep this 3 from before. My first factor comes from this 5 and this 2. I'm going to write 5x plus 2. The 5 goes by the x, the 2 comes next. My next factor will be 3x minus 4. And so here is my final factorization. Of course, before I would write this down as a test and think it's my final answer, you want to go back and FOIL this out and make sure that you actually come up with the quadratic trinomial that you started with.